Yeah.
Resume recording. So we're recording now. We've learned about yesterday. I hope we had a good session. We'll still send a survey to understand how you guys are learning. And um, I'm going to explain you what happens after today. And tomorrow we're going to have a practical session. Most likely, we are going to be on the field. You guys will be given a list of 200 candidates each. So, and you will have a questionnaire. And before you guys begin, I will have a quick session um, on how to call these candidates and what data you are trying to collect. So we are looking at making 200 phone calls. Unfortunately, after the 200, we'll probably be able to connect only with about 15 or 20 people. Usually the ratio is about 15%. That's going to be the actual connectivity. Then you talk to a real candidate. So we're working on it. So be prepared. Don't miss the session tomorrow. You must be there to ensure you are going through the practical aspect of aspect of this whole training. Then we will understand the market is going to teach what is required. Just to do a quick cap of what happened, what we did yesterday. Once again, we are a staffing business located in the USA with operating locations in Canada, operations in Mexico, India, Bangladesh, and we are now heading into United Kingdom as well. Under our group companies, uh, candidates who are billing, who are actually making money for us, working at client sites. Um, we have close to 200 consultants. We spoke about who consultants are, and over 50 internal staff members right now. I don't have the actual number, it could be higher. And once again, we provide temporary and permanent staffing and consulting services. 95% is temporary, which is the contractual model. So, and once again, the goals for our training sessions, we expect to continue hands-on classroom, the learning up until next Friday. So stay tuned. Don't miss the training sessions. It's very important that we participate in every session. Once you participate in more session, this becomes more interesting. Trust me. I know it's little, we've had little too much yesterday, maybe, I don't know, 2 hours, and then you probably had some more group sessions. But then, it gets more interesting. We'll try to make this more fun. I wanted to um, give you a first-hand impression on how candidates talk to you and what is happening on the field, which is more on a fun scale, entertaining than sitting on this Zoom session now. So once again, the goals are trying to understand. I think we have already learned. We were able to learn knowledge of U.S. staffing market, and we will cover types of visas today and taxes, the tax terms often used in the market. I'll try to give you examples on what it looks like in India and how you compare with the US. So it becomes a lot easier to understand. And sourcing, which probably we will be doing a practical session, as I mentioned earlier, that is tomorrow, most likely. And then we would also get exposed to recruitment in the future sessions when you have hands-on with senior recruitment members. And then go live in about 2 weeks. So we spoke about introduction about the US. I hope you guys have familiarized yourselves on what the US is. Once again, it's in the North American continent, one of the large countries in North America. And North America is a continent, by the way. So USA is a country. And we spoke about time zones, job markets, and what is recruitment. I will still cover what is recruitment today, the recruitment life cycle. Then we spoke about I think this is covered, time zones. Okay, we learned about what is a contract versus a full-time job. So I hope you guys are clear. If you still have questions, we should definitely address them today because we are getting into some advanced topics. So you need to be prepared with the basics, the fundamentals of this whole process. Um, we spoke a little bit about job titles and roles, so we will get into the advanced stage as well with job titles. Most likely, not today, but then the day after you are done with your phone callings, emailing, and the etiquettes, how to talk to people, and how nice you need to be, how patient, and how you demonstrate that clear. And the way I'm talking right now, I'm trying to speak very slowly. I'm not rushing, and I'm using a pace where it is clear for the other party for you to understand. So this is the pace we must maintain to ensure the other party is able to clearly understand your actions, what you say, what you speak, and your expressions while you're on the phone. And the emails, the etiquettes of emails, simple emails, how good you need to be to ensure you're not writing some crap. Um, Clean English, you don't have to be grammatically super correct, but it has to make sense. We will try to give you scripts, um, templates that you can use while you're emailing candidates to make it's going to be a copy and paste. Okay, welcome back to day number 2 of the training session, US recruitment. And the word I have not used yet, bench sales, which we will talk about once we handpick candidates. Handpick people from you. You will be working into sales. So, which is, selling candidate resumes to companies. In other words, placing them on jobs. It's the other way around. Here we are doing recruitment based on a client job. With sales, often referred to as bench sales, we are going to pick a candidate, market the resume to clients. So it's more or less, the end of the day, it's a placement process. We are placing candidates, but little different. So Harsh will handpick people who would be more interested in getting into bench sales. So we will not cover those topics, but I just wanted to give you a heads up what is in the store for us in the upcoming sessions. Okay. I know this image is a little off, but then it sends a message. This is a recruitment life cycle. What happens when a client has a job requirement? A job requirement which is coming from a client. In many ways, it is referred to as a job order. So the client is sending out an order, a job order. They have a project on a high level. They plan to implement a project. Now they want to hire candidates to work on their project. I'll give you an example, like we did yesterday. A healthcare company, like for example, say United Healthcare, wants to gather data of all the COVID-19 victims, or people who are probably who perished, who died, the 500,000, more than 550,000, 550,000 people in the US. They want to collect census, they want to collect demographics, they want to collect a lot of data, what happened when they were infected, so on and so forth. We will not get there. and they want to create an application. So now they're creating a project. This project requires a project manager, let's assume, on a lower level, an architect to design, architect the entire system, the project life cycle, and then they probably need developers, they need programmers, they need quality assurance personnel, so on and so forth. So once they have listed their job requirements and these technologies that they want to work on, implement this project. Say, for example, they want to use Microsoft.NET and use a SQL Server database, small example, and use some kind of JSON or JavaScript for the UI. So they're looking for different types of people to fill these roles to implement this project. So they create the job orders. The job orders are sent out to companies like us. We will discuss this in the next topic. And your job is to analyze the job order, understand the job order, and source candidates by posting. So what happens when you get a job order? The job order is going into our internal ATS, stands for applicant tracking system. There are many applicant tracking systems out there. Some companies have their own internal customs applicant tracking system. So we do have a custom applicant tracking system as well, but we no longer use that. We have something called CPAL. For now, we might be moving into another ATS in the future. At the moment, we are using something called CPAL. So your account manager or the recruitment manager will post these job orders on the applicant tracking system. Typically, you'll receive an email that a job is assigned to you. Your account or recruitment manager may even have a session with you before you open up with your sourcing efforts and followed by the recruitment efforts. So they might discuss with you if you're junior, try to explain you to make sure you are sourcing a right candidate who is a fit for the job. In simple terms, for a plumbing job, you're not sourcing an electrician. Very simple. And for a large electric job, you're not hiring a junior electrician. For example, somebody who does switches at home may not be able to handle transformers sitting out there, right? So likewise, there are junior, mid, and senior levels. So it might be an electrician job, but then you have to analyze the job order, understand what is the number one A, what is the industry that they're looking for. If it's coming from a healthcare industry, so we are looking for people who are with the healthcare background, who have experience with healthcare, IT, everything is IT, but who have typically worked in a healthcare environment. If it's a finance, they have worked in the finance. This is the most important item when you start working. You are going to be talking to candidates who are relevant, who have relevant experience or exposure to that domain or industry. This is very critical in terms of when you talk to candidates. Rule of the thumb. The first rule when you're talking to keep this in mind forever. When you are picking a candidate, rule of the thumb, number one is localization. So you want to look local candidates. If the job is in New York, you're looking for your first attempt is to look for candidates in New York. I know there is, COVID, there is remote, but this is general. Maybe in 6 months or 8 months, this pandemic is going to go have an end. Then, everything is going to be business as usual and business back to normal, where candidates may go on site and work. So localization, even if it's remote, clients are still looking for candidates locally. Rule of the thumb, number one, you are looking for, if it's New York, you're looking in proximity, 30, 40, 50 miles where they can drive or commute to work, commute to the client site. Rule number one, localization. You're not looking for a candidate in California if your job is in New York City. It doesn't make sense. After, you have done everything, they may not be interested in joining your job. You'll be wasting your time. So unless you can't find people, localization, localization, localization. So go local, look for local candidates. If you have work at home, very simple. I'll give you this classic example once again. You have a plumbing problem at home. You're not looking for a candidate in New Delhi or Hyderabad. You're going to look for somebody in Gandhinagar, right? Not even Ahmedabad if you guys are in Gandhinagar. So this is how it works. So keep that in mind. And the second thing, industry experience. The different terms, industry verticals, domains. For our, if you put it on the lower level, this is all the same. So you're definitely looking for someone who has the relevant industry experience more than the technology and skill. If the client is if the client is in the financial industry, you're looking for a candidate who've had experience in the finance. Let me reassert again, once again. Number one, localization. Go local, find local candidates who have the ability to commute. Number two, industry experience, background in a similar industry as the client who's providing the job order. Okay. So once the job order is posted, you get this email. You might get a job order via the system, the applicant tracking system, or your manager may simply email it to you and ask you in certain circumstances. I do that. I just send out an email. I don't post it on the applicant tracking system, but 99% of the time we will ensure it is routed through the applicant tracking system. Now, once you analyze the job order, you understand the job order, you very well read through the job order. You have to act like you are going to be the applicant. You have to put yourselves in the shoes of the client, understand the job as if you are the hiring manager. So you are playing a dual role. You have to clearly read through the job, understand it pretty well. If you have any questions, go back to your account manager and say, hey, this does not make sense. What does not make sense? For example, a Java developer. This is what you're going to see on a daily basis. There is a job description for a Java developer. Hold on for 1 second. Let me see. So we'll cover more on the job requirement, how to slice it, how to analyze it, the what do you call the dissection of the job. We would certainly do that in the upcoming topics. And once you understand the job requirement pretty well, thinking from a client manager, what you would do if you're the hiring manager. And when you start sourcing, thinking as an applicant, put yourself in the shoes of an applicant. What is that you would do if you are the applicant? You need to thoroughly understand the job. This is where the success lies. So the key points which we've been discussing since yesterday: phone calls, calling as many as you can. Number two is your localization. Number three, industry experience of the candidate. These are key metrics which circle around the entire process. If you master these three items, hey, I have a job, ABCs of this job. These are the skills. This is what I'm looking for. It makes your life a lot easier when you're connected with the candidate. Yesterday, somebody had this good question. How do we find these fake candidates? By having a dialogue with the candidate. You know what you want. Resumes are often cooked up. There's a lot of stuff they add in resume. It's a copy paste from other resumes or from Google. So what will help you sail through this process is to pick up that phone and call the candidate. We are going to do that marathon tomorrow. Tomorrow is most likely tomorrow. So then once you have the job, now you are going to be posting your job on job boards to begin with, social media like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitters. We will have a separate session of posting, one full day of posting. We will run some practical sessions. I will show you where I post, how I post, what needs to be done. Tagging, there's a lot of things have changed. Mass mails, sending out mass emails, and sending out to third-party companies. We will get there. Next topic is about who the companies are, where to find candidates. So once you have posted, then you start looking on job boards, searching on job boards, searching for resumes on job boards. One is posting. Rule number one is posting. Don't waste your time searching. Post. Let the internet get to work. It takes 20 minutes on an average to post a job on the internet into 50 different platforms. This is what it takes, max 20 minutes. I do it in about 10 minutes. So once you get used to it, you'll probably drop it down to 10 minutes. You are young, and I see you have a lot of energy. I'm sure you guys are going to, break the time that I take, and I really want you to do that. Now, once you have posted, then you are searching on the internet. What I mean by the internet, you're probably performing searches on job boards like Dice, ZipRecruiter, Monster. If you have a Monster account, I'm not sure. And then we jumped into sites like LinkedIn to find these candidates. We will cover more on the sourcing techniques the upcoming days, which goes through posting, the entire 360 degrees of finding, searching, etc., etc. The technical side of searching will be handled by one of our senior members, most likely on Friday. His name is Ranjit. He will probably be handling showing you how to put keywords, Boolean searches, passive versus active candidate searches. Passive candidates are people who are not actively looking. Very simple. The language itself, the verbiage itself, self-explanatory. And once you have qualified candidates, then screening, the next part of the life cycle, screening, evaluating the candidate, checking visas, work permits, and getting necessary agreements, which is going to authorize us to submit his candidature, his resume to the client. And then goes into if the resume is shortlisted by the client, then there will be an interview. And then, assisting through your job is done once there is an interview and the candidate is selected. The human resources administration teams will take over from that point to onboard the candidate so the candidate can go and work for the client. I will take a pause here. I'll take 2 minutes. If you have any questions, please shoot about the recruitment life cycle only. Anyone? Any questions? Hello, can you guys hear me?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, what exactly is the meaning of posting a job on internet? I mean, are we going to post a job and then we are going to find some relevant candidates according to our search or something like that?
That's a good question. That's an interesting question. We will definitely cover more on this, but what I mean, when you have a job, for example, I'll give you a very simple example. We'll go back to basics. If you are trying to buy something in India, you probably go to sites like OLX, right? Yes. Or some classified site. For example, you want to buy a bike, a second-hand used bike. So you would probably put an ad on sites like OLX or or your WhatsApp groups. You send out a message on WhatsApp groups. Hey friends, I'm looking to buy a used bike. I'm looking for a used Yamaha bike, right? Likewise, when there is a job order, I will show you practically, once we get there. but this is just the life cycle for now. We take this job order, the job posting, and put it on the internet. What the internet comprises of various websites like a job board where you can post jobs and attract candidates. After the job boards in the last 12, 13 years, now we have Facebook, now we have LinkedIn, we have WhatsApp groups. So typically we take our job and post it everywhere possible to, to for the applicants to apply to your job. So you have candidates to talk to. Once this process is done, then the second, that is the internet is now working where you are getting inbound applications from job seekers based on your job. This is process number one. Once this process is working, the internet is going to all these job boards, the social media, people are searching on the internet, they start applying to your job. We don't sit and wait for somebody to respond to your job. Then we also go on the job boards, job websites to search for candidates who are otherwise looking for jobs. Is that clear?
All right. Yes, sir.
All right, I will make a point about this. I see there's still some confusion. When we get into the action, then you'll understand what I'm talking about. I have a point about this. This is a full day session on posting, and we do this practically. I'll keep this on hold for now. Okay. So this is about the and who's this?
Sayan.
Who has this question?
Sayan, sir.
Sorry,
Sayan.
Sayan. Okay, that's a good question, Sayan.
Thank
All right, let's not jump the gun. Let's wait. We're getting there. Okay, that's a good question, though. Thank you. All right. So we've understood the kind of. I know we still have questions, but about the job orders, the entire recruitment life cycle, we do it in action. We run a practical session. Now, what happens? Unless you work out there on the field, you're not going to really, get answers to many of these questions. So let's hang in there, and we will definitely ensure you are clear. So don't be in a state of confusion. This will be addressed. When you see it, very simple. Now, this is like a trailer. We'll watch the real movie. Okay. All right. So this is just a teaser trailer, and then we'll get into the real movie. Okay. The contractual staffing model. This might be a little confusing, but I'll try to push in examples for you to understand how this whole process works. As we spoke before, there is a client who's looking for a job. And who's a vendor? A vendor is a supplier. Just like, we've had the example of Modi Constructions. Modi Constructions wants to hire a civil engineer. Now, Modi Constructions will reach out to staffing companies who are otherwise called vendors. They might reach out to one staffing company. They might reach out to 20 different staffing companies, also known as employment agencies. Tell them, hey, I'm looking for a civil engineer. And please send me suitable candidates. Now, the vendor sometimes is also referred to as a contractor. So a staffing company. There are different types of languages people use. So we need to get a little familiarized with the lingo that people use on for the usage on a day-to-day basis. Now, after Modi Constructions has reached out to us, ABC staffing company. Now the ABC, for example, let's take an example of a large multinational company. Again, they might think, okay, why don't we use other smaller companies who are subcontractors? So there is a client who has a job going into their supplier, who's the vendor. and then a subcontractor. I'll get more on this on the next slide. Okay. Now, who are clients? Once again, to reiterate, a client is a company who's probably looking for IT personnel for their projects, as we discussed before. These clients, for example, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, the tons and tons and thousands of tens of thousands of them. In most of the cases, they are referred to as clients or end clients. So end client means a company who's actually seeking services, who's actually paying, who's actually the employer, who's employing that contract candidate, not on their payroll, but these are the lingos you need to understand. Although the candidate is going for a contract, there is, if the end client is Google, somebody is actually going to Google location, sitting in Google's office and providing these services. Just like in our example of a plumber who has, your dad needs a plumber. Your dad tells the what do you call the vegetable bandiwala, and the vegetable bandiwala has, this is your medium, like WhatsApp group. Your dad has posted on someplace, and then the plumber is coming from a company. I've seen that example in India. They have justdial.com. So you are going to Just Dial. Just Dial is a medium like a website, the job board, where you're posting a job on Just Dial. And Just Dial is referring, in this case, Just Dial is nothing but like a dice.com or Zip Recruiter. There are many job boards. You're also posting the same job on WhatsApp groups. You're telling friends, here, say, you're, networking. Hey, I need a great plumber. I have a problem at home. Nothing is getting fixed. Just Dial will refer it to 10 different companies, again, who are staffing the plumbers. So ultimately, the plumber is coming from Just Dial is an advertising platform, like a job board. It is a job board, in other words. A part of the site is a job board. And it goes into companies who are actually are connected, employed for these companies, who are typically the staffing companies. I'll give you one more example. For my dad, we hired like a nurse. The nurse is coming from, we posted a job stating we need a nurse, somebody who's like a caretaker. We posted the job requirement on Just Dial. I received phone calls from 10 agents who are typically like a staffing company. They said, okay, I have these people, I'll send it to you. So they make a cut. So we are actually paying the staffing company. They have sent a caretaker, nurse, who's actually working for my dad. So who's the end client in this whole situation? Is my dad is the end client who's actually seeking the services. In this example, if you have Google is the client who's actually looking for these services. Then we use different terms as customers, ultimate clients, end clients. A client manager is looking for something. That means it's a company. Hiring manager. So there are different languages, different terms that are used to define a client who's actually seeking services. Okay. Now, in that example of Just Dial, I said there's a staffing company. These are typically called vendors. Now the client has a job. I'm talking about a contract position in most cases, 95% of the time. In a contract model, as I said, we'll be focusing more on the contract model, less on full times. One second. Okay. Now, vendors are the suppliers, just like hire IT people. We are a supplier to several clients. So typically on a given day, We get a job order, also known as a job requirement or a job description. We get a job from a client. Let's assume it is Amazon. Amazon requires people. They will reach out to one of us at Hierarchy People asking, hey, I need this SAP consultant, SAP BPM, I think it's business process management, SAP BPM. Now we are expanding this. Under SAP, now you have another skill, which is the business process management. There are tons and tons of these skills, which are often referred to as modules for several of these softwares. And it goes to one of our account managers. Excuse me, 1 second. It goes into one of the account managers. For example, we have Kathleen Parker on this call, on this session. It goes to Kathleen. So Kathleen will attempt to collect more data from the client. What is that they can pay? Most importantly, money is the most important factor. And what is the job location? So let's take an example. We have a job from AT&T. Now Kathleen will analyze the job. If everything is in the email, most likely when they send out job descriptions, it's a little chaotic with the COVID, where all of us are confused about, where the candidate will be sitting. But in general, the job itself, we will get there. We're going to do the anatomy of a job. But then Kathleen will figure out, hey, this is the job, this is the location, this is what we can pay the candidate, blah, blah, blah. And then it will be sent out to you. So because we got it first on level 1, we are going to be that vendor, often referred to as, again, it has lingos, different terms. They're called tier 1 vendors, preferred suppliers, implementation partners, which is a little off the hook. I will get there. So these are people who are working on level 1 with the client. From AT&T, if the job is directly coming to hire IT people, our company, then we are the preferred vendor. We are the tier 1, level 1 vendor or a preferred supplier. People also use terms like gatekeepers, blah, blah, blah. We don't want to get confused with those unwanted terms. Now, so at this level, this is what you're going to do. This is going to be your job. At this level, now you are the vendor now. You are representing Hierarchy People. So you're a part of Hierarchy People. You are going to be the vendor. You are going to be the recruiter and the vendor of AT&T or any client where we are working in level 1, providing direct services to a client like AT&T or Google or Amazon, so on and so forth. On the tier 1 vendor scale, like Hierarchy People, there might be large companies who are often referred to as system implementers or implementation partners. A classic example is companies like large multinational companies like TCS, Infosys, HCL, Wipro, and Accenture. There are Indian companies, a lot of them, who are acting as implementation partners in the US. They take a large chunk of the market share because these are pretty large companies coming from India. There might be other companies from China. There might be other companies from the US like Cognizant. There are tons of large companies. So what these guys typically do, if it's Hierarchy People, let's assume Hierarchy People is only sending staff. AT&T has a job and we are only sending people, talent. But what these large companies like Infosys or TCS, they do, they actually execute the project for them. They sit on their site with their team members, with their project managers, and they do it in a dual fashion. They're going to execute the project via on-site and offshore model. Say there is a large project worth $10 million. They will negotiate with the client. They will staff the project for them. They will architect the project. They will manage the project. They will ultimately, they will do the deliverables. They'll deliver the project, the completed whatever the product is for that client by virtue of having staff on site at the client site. They are like turnkey providers, just like our other example. If you're constructing a house, you are going to give it to a large company like Modi Constructions, where they take turnkey and do everything for you for a fixed budget. So these are the implementation partners. They are on the higher level, we are on the lower level. That's the only difference. We are only staffing, and they are staffing plus implementing that project, taking the responsibility of the entire project from inception to production, from scratch to the end, inception, induction to the production. They start at ground zero, they complete the project. These are implementation partners. We will be working a lot with implementation partners. So in other words, there are layers of companies who might act under the client. So there might be one person, there might be one company, there might be multiple companies who act to support, eventually fill a role, a job order, a job description, a job requirement, a requisition, job requisition with the client. So the final goal is to find all these people involved in this entire process. You, me, higher IT people, or any other company, the ultimate goal is to find a suitable, a matching candidate for a job requirement. Now what happens if you are unable to find candidates on your own? Now you take help. Now, when we posted that requirement on Just Dial for a plumber, 10 staffing companies have come in. They said, hey, I can find a right plumber for you. But these 10 companies could not find, let's say out of the 10, one company, you have hired one company. And this one company, let's say XYZ plumbing agency, staffing agency, you wanted to find somebody real quick. So they were looking in their database of plumbers. They could not find available plumbers in their database. Now this ABC plumbing company will reach out to XYZ, another company, to say, hey, do you have candidates in your database, plumbers in your database? I have a client, I have an end client who's actually looking for plumbers. I don't have plumbers in my database. Can you supply me? And you take your cut. These are called, now they're adding. Now in this case, if this ABC plumbing company is the supplier or the vendor to that client who's actually hiring, now, or a contractor, they're also called contractors. Now they are going to reaching out to another company who will become their subcontractor, or a sub vendor, or a sub supplier, like a subordinate. So they have created another company. They have reached out to another company to get that plumber. So that's where we are on the next slide. So these are the various companies who are supporting ultimate goal to find that candidate, find that talent to fill a job role. Now, what happened when you go back to this? Now there's a client. If you see on my right, this is the job seeker sitting somewhere. The client has sent out a job requirement. There's a reason I did not put graphics into this. I really want you to go back to this session and listen once again and understand. I don't want to, put too much of content where you are able to visualize this. I want you to understand it, not just, visualize, look at something and not understand this. So the client has a job requisition. Client needs a person to do a job, say example, a Java developer role. Now client has reached out to vendor. Now the vendor may pick that candidate on the right directly. For example, higher IT people. Now higher IT people could not find. So who's the vendor in this case? You are representing higher IT people. You are the, as a recruiter, your responsibility is to, excuse me, is to find that job seeker who matches the skills as required by the client's job. Now you're unable to find a candidate matching in your database, your internet search. Now you will further reach out to other companies who are subcontractors. They will help, but ultimately the candidate may come via the subcontractor who makes money, which is a layer. See these layers here. And in some circumstances, there might be another second subcontractor under the subcontractor. So the job seeker is coming through multiple parties before he provides services to the client. So again, I'm sure you guys have this question. Everybody makes money and the job seeker loses money. Yes. A classic example, client is now wanting to pay $100 an hour for a particular job. So it comes to higher IT people. Higher IT people will keep a $15 markup and tell the candidate, hey, we'll pay the $85. You did not find them on your own. Now you sent it to a subcontractor, another company. The other company, you'll tell them, hey, I'll pay you 85. Now the other company will eat up another $10 and will pay $75 to the candidate. Now there is another layer. They will keep another $10. So it's like the ice, which is, ice block. If you take an ice cube and, circle it around, I'm sure you've seen in movies, it starts melting. That's how, this whole staffing model works. So once again, the subcontracting companies are often referred to as third-party companies. In certain cases, we might become a third-party company. We're not directly working as level one to the client. Sometimes most of the times we are also working with companies like Infosys, where we are a tier one vendor to Infosys, the implementation partner, not to their end client. They might have another client like Verizon. But then being large, we still pride ourselves being a supplier to companies like Infosys. This is something when you get to the practicality, you will get more exposure and understand to avoid this, little confusion that you have today. But trust me, this is only an initial hiccup. It might look a little confusing, but once you get into practice tomorrow and next week, this becomes a cakewalk. This is very simple. It sounds a little odd because you just started, trying to understand this whole staffing model, but then this is going to be a cakewalk. In 3 weeks, trust me, you'll just laugh at me. We'll laugh all of us together. We'll have a fun session where we think, oh, this was so simple. I've seen people who said, oh, Dan, I can't understand any of this. But then after 3 weeks, it becomes a cakewalk. So layers are third party. So in that pyramid example, what I've shown, there might be more companies which add up as add-ons at the bottom. And we have seen cases where there are 5-6 layers. The client is paying $100 an hour. All these companies eat up $10 each. There were 5 layers based on my experience in one of the jobs. They ate up $50. The candidate ultimately gets only $30 an hour. So this is the contract model. Likewise in India, you have large contractors doing those bridges, dams, and those large projects, right? It's the same model all over the world, contract model. A contracting company makes money. They keep their cut. They pay something to their employees or the workers. So it's the same model, no confusion. It's the same thing. When you are confused, just look at how that model works and the examples I've given about Just Dial. If you are going to hire a plumber or electrician or somebody for your own home, what happens in the process? Just put your brain to work. Very simple. What you have done when your dad wanted you to find an electrician or something else that you cannot find in your neighborhood, you are posting on Just Dial, or you're posting on WhatsApp, or you're posting on Facebook. It's more or less the same process. And we will try to take a break. I'll come back in about sorry, I was on mute. All right, let's jump into the work permits. I might take a few breaks here and there because I'm still waiting for those images of various types of visas. Just like in India, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but then I will try to give you simple examples in terms of what is a work permit. Um, for anyone, for example, you hold an Indian passport, you are an Indian citizen. You don't need a separate work permits to start working in India. You can just, just like you're working for hiring people today, you can work for any employer because you are a US citizen. India also has work permits. I'm not sure about the green cards, but then India also has work permits. If somebody is coming from other countries, they require a work permit. Just like, there are a lot of people who, even Americans who come to India to work. And there are people coming from neighboring countries, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh. So they also require a work permit. It's a straightforward process in India. There is Indian citizen who don't need a work permit to work. Then there is, foreigners who come in. There is a standard one single work permit. But in the US, it's a little complicated. Again, it is complicated based on how they have come, on what visas they've entered. They're given different work permits. For example, somebody has come here as a student, and after they have completed their course, they typically issue work permits which are relevant to the course, so they can gain practical industry experience with that work permit. And there are, as you all know, the popular H1b visa, which is work permit from day one. People come into this country on an H1b visa. Then people stay here for certain years, apply for a green card, and get a green card, which is a lifetime work permit. As long as the green card, from green card they can become US citizens. Green card works mostly like a US citizen work permit. There's nothing called a work permit for US citizens, but for today's discussion, we'll just use the term work permit. Green cards are free to work anywhere, just like the US citizens. More or less, they enjoy the same benefits as US citizens, except for voting. There is no vote for the green card holders. After being a green card holder for 5 years, they can grandfather, and they can apply for US citizenship. People go through this journey of coming into the country on different visas. People come on tourist visas, they apply for an H1, they get a work permit. But everyone must have a work permit in order to work. Active, valid work permit, just like a driver license. You cannot drive if it's not active. You must have an active work permit. let's get started with the US US citizens and green cards. I'll take one single pause here. Just give me one. All right, welcome back. Okay, so typically, as I stated before, US citizens are either born here or naturalized, who lived in this country for a certain number of years, who obtained the green card first and became a turn to be a US citizen. Um, so this is typically a US passport. You're not asking for copies at any point of time for to US citizens, but then there are certain categories where your account manager may require you to collect documents like their H1b visa. So this is very simple. US citizens can work for any employer. So give me 1 second, guys. All right. I hope it's clear about US citizens. They are free to work for any employer. No questions asked. It's permanent forever. And we don't have to worry about doing anything with, when somebody says I'm a US citizen, you don't have to go crazy about their work permit. Likewise, with the green card holders, it's the same thing. They can work for any employer. There are no restrictions at all, just like US citizens. They're free to work. And usually, although this says the green card has an expiry, keep one thing in mind when you work with candidates, um, even if their green card has expired, it does not mean that they don't have the ability to work. So green cards may be expired, they can continue to work if their green card has expired and while they are in this country. So there are no restrictions in terms of expiry of a green card. So keep that in mind uh, about the green card holders. Um, and now let's jump into the popular H1b visa. So H1b visas are sponsored by companies like us, sponsored by companies like Google, large companies, small companies, medium companies. Many companies do sponsor H1b visas every year. The H1b visa allows candidates to work only for the sponsoring employer. So for example, if higher IT people have sponsored an H1, they can only work for higher IT people. However, they can work as a contractor at a client site. In our classic example before, when AT&T has a job order and higher IT people is sending out a candidate who's on an H1, we hold the H1b visa. We are the employer on record. And can you guys hear me? Can someone say hello?
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yes,
can
sir.
hear you.
All right, wonderful. So there is a sponsoring company, typically a staffing company like us. We also sponsor H1b visas, by the way. And then we send these people as contractors to clients. But then they can only be on our payroll because we are the sponsoring company. They cannot be under client's payroll. So they are typically working there as a contractor. H1b visas can easily be transferred to other companies. Today they are working for our company. Tomorrow they might move into ABC company, then CBC company, XYZ company, so on and so forth. They are free to move. There are no restrictions. There are only restrictions as long as they are ex companies holding their H1b visa, and once they're in the country or they're out of the country, they can transfer out to employers. That there's a huge extreme flexibility with the H1b visas. But at one time, they can work for one employer They can also have two different H1Bs with two different employers, do a part-time job. That's a possibility as well. H1B visas are typically this. It's very important to understand the concepts around. We've learned about US citizens and green cards pretty straightforward. They can work for anyone for their lifetime without any restrictions, unless the green card holders uh, get caught. There's some kind of a fraud. Their green card is cancelled. It's a very rare, occasional, very extreme, rare situations. It happens to IT workers. I've not heard of, in the last 20 years, I've heard of only one case where the green card was cancelled by the immigration enforcement. And but the H1B visa is very, very important for our jobs because we'll be circling around a lot of H1B candidates on a day-to-day basis. You are exposed to a lot of them. So let's learn more about the H1. H1B visa is given for a maximum of 6 years to start with approvals. So the total tenure of an H1B visa to start with is 6 years, which is given in multiples of 3 years, a maximum of 3 years. It can be given for a year, sometimes based on the job, 6 months, 2 years, but at one shot approval is only for 3 years, which can be extended up to 6 years only. Now, if they want to extend beyond the 6 years, they have to have a green card process pending. We'll stop it there. And once the green card process is pending, they can continue to extend it for the rest of, let's say 5 years, 10 years, 20 years until they receive their green card. So beyond 6 years, they have to have a pending green card process to extend their H1. And H1B visa candidates can only be employed with their sponsoring company. Once again, H1B visas are most popular. Every year, there are about 80,000 H1B visas. Most of the H1B visas are eaten by uh, people from India. I think about 70 to 80% is taken away by Indians. And most of the IT workers are, and H1B visa is not restricted to IT workers alone. They could be doctors, they could be other people like civil engineers, other disciplines as well. But mostly IT workers make the chunk of H1B visas, and mostly from India. So this is very important to understand what the H1 is. When you get into the practical mode, we will still do, with the question we've had yesterday, the fake profiles. This is the stem. So we are going to look at the H1 because people even send, my next topic will cover, we'll go back to H1B visa once again, how they game the system, how companies game the system, which is very important to learn what happens when they come here and how the system is gamed. So the next type is the employment authorization document. So we've learned about US citizens, we've learned about green cards and the H1. Now there is another popular work permit called employment authorization document itself. It comes in various forms and shapes. For example, an H1B visa holder's spouse, a wife or a husband, they hold something called an H4 visa to be in this country. Under certain circumstances, when their green card is pending, they also get a work permit, which is called, often referred to as H4 EAD. Likewise, there is an L2 EAD, which is a spouse of an L1 visa. L1 visas, we're not going to focus much on L1 visas. L1 visa candidates come as a transfer, intra-company transfer. For example, somebody is working with Infosys for a year in India, they can get transferred to their Infosys location in the US after serving for a year. And they can also, they can only work for their employer. They can't go out again do contracting. So we are, in other words, we are not going to be working with any L1 visas, but we do work with their spouses who, if somebody is coming and showing an employment authorization, irrespective of what type of authorization it is. But there are some restrictions, I'll get there. Somebody has a green card pending, they get a work permit, which is called the employment authorization document. Somebody's on a different visa, irrespective, they have a work permit, a valid work permit. We have removed the dates here, but it says card expires. Unlike a green card, if this has expired, they cannot work. Keep that in mind. So just like as in green cards, these guys also can work for any employer. There are no restrictions. But then, the only restriction is there is a card, the document or the validity expiry. So that's something we need to keep in mind. If it has expired, they say, oh, my case is pending, they cannot work. They have to produce a valid work permit, unlike a green card. Now, the F1 students, this is where we have a lot of connection between. We can have an entire different session on this again if people are confused. The F1 students, there are typically two types of people who come into the country. Students who are nothing but the F1 category. After they have come in, after they graduate, especially with the STEM disciplines, science, technology, engineering, and management, they get a 1-year employment authorization document, which looks just like this, but it clearly says optional practical training on the card. If you look at one of the onto the extreme right, one of these images, terms and conditions, we blacked it out, but they clearly state that this is optional practical training. So these guys can typically, the only restriction for these people, unlike the H4 EAD or the L2 EAD, they cannot go and work at a Walmart. They have to work in the same discipline. For example, they went for a master's in information technology or computer science, they have to pick up a computer science related job only. But they're free to work for any employer as long as these conditions are met based on their education. They are given, after they graduate, they are given a 12 months of optional practical training work permit. Again, a work permit is nothing but employment authorization document, EAD, related to the field of study. So if somebody has done MBA in, say, sales, they can only pick up a job in sales. MBA, or they have done something in engineering, like a construction civil engineer, they get a 12 months work permit to work in an area which is related to their field of study, what they have done in their masters. In certain cases, people who come for a bachelor's degree are also given optional practical training for a year, now mostly in the IT disciplines. Now, once the 12 months has expired, for people with STEM backgrounds, science, technology, engineering, whatever, math, not management, math, it's called a STEM OPT. This is an extension to the OPT, which is given again for another 24 months, 2 years. So typically people who have had the STEM degrees, they get a total of 3 years of employment authorization document to work for any employers, but with the condition that it is only related to their field of study, which typically looks again like this, the one on the extreme right. Terms and conditions, it clearly states, if you look on my left, the first image, it says terms and conditions none, which means this was probably a employment document, which authorization document, which was given while their green card is pending, or given to a H4 H1b spouse or an L1 the L2 spouse without any terms and conditions, which means they can work for any employer, do what they want. They can go work at a gas station, they can work at Walmart, they can work at a grocery store. But the students, OPTs and STEM OPTs, there's another student category, I'm getting there. They can only work in the field of their study. And mostly, somebody had, a 2-year master's degree in IT, they can do any type of IT job in simple terms. Same thing with OPT and same thing with STEM OPT. Now, you might be thinking, what happens after both are expired? They continue to apply for H1b, change their student status. As long as they have the OPT, STEM OPT, they're continuing to be in student status, even though they're not attending college. They go to employers every year, employers like us. There's a H1b lottery since 2008, last 12, 13 years. And they try to obtain an H1 because, the maximum they can get is 12 plus 24 is about 3 years. Apart from the OPT and STEM OPT, there is something called a CPT. So OPT stands for optional practical training, and there is a Cpt Work Permit, which is called a curricular practical training. So if somebody is actually attending college or an F1 visa, but the education requires that they also get practical training while they're studying. So the college will issue a work permit anywhere between 20 to 40 hours for them to work. So they're not getting a different employment card from the immigration, like we have seen in the previous slide. They're going to have, this is their typical F1 visa, which is called I-20. The conditions of the student enrolling in a college. On the right, they will authorize, if you look at the right, they will authorize employer information. For example, if they have to work for higher IT people, every time, just like the H1b transfer, every time they have a new employer, they will go back to school after we issue an offer letter, employment letter, job letter. They will go back to the school, which is the college, the university, typically called a school, and get an approval permit for 3 months, 6 months, a year, depending on their course. And these could be people who have come into the country day one on a student visa requesting CPT, because the OPT is only given after they graduate. CPT can be given anytime. And people whose H1b is not picked in the lottery. Now, there is another side of the story. They have completed 3 years here. They've been trying in the lottery. They didn't get the H1b picked in the lottery. So they join school again. Then they come up with the CPT to extend, more time so that they can work and make money. Okay, I'm not done yet. We'll jump into questions. I know this is a little complex, but we would definitely love to go with each category and answer any questions you may have. Now, we spoke about the L1 visa, who can only work for the sponsoring company, transfer from overseas. They cannot typically do a contract job, with a client, as opposed to H1b. If somebody is transferred from, say, TCS to their office, say in New Jersey, TCS office, they can only sit in the TCS office and work because they are transferred from one location to a branch location in the US. And L2 visas, we spoke about them. Both H4s and the L2s have to, separately apply for a work permit from the USCIS. Then the USCIS, like we have seen the images before, USCIS, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, will approve an employment authorization document so that they can work. Apart from these categories, now there are other categories which will enable them to work. These are just like, more or less like the H1b visas, TN visa and E3 visa. But with a less complex process, H1b visa requires that we send an application to, it goes through the lottery. If it's picked in the lottery, then we send an application to the immigration approves it, the USCIS. Then we send the documents to, if somebody is in India, we send it overseas, they go to the consulate. So this is a time taking and money spending process. TN visa is given for candidates who are Canadian and Mexican citizens. They could be from India, they became a Canadian citizen. So these two countries have, it's called NAFTA treaty, North American Free Trade Agreement. Under the NAFTA treaty, US allows a TN visa, which is very easy to procure. In terms of the Canadians, they have a job, we give them a job letter, they come through the port of entry, the border, and just apply at the port of entry. They just get it in, the same day. Mexican nationals, more or less the same process. They have to go to the consulate, but there is no USCIS involved in terms of processing this. E3 visa is given for Australian nationals, Australian citizens, just like Canadian and Mexican. They can, it's like the H1. It's a simple process. They have to go to the consulate to get a visa. We give them a job offer letter. They go to the consulate, get a stamping, and come in. So these are the most popular visas. There might be different types of employment authorization documents beyond this, but when you're looking at an employment authorization document, you see something different. We have this marathon on a daily basis. People come back to me, this guy he applied for asylum. He has a work permit. Can we work with him? Yes, as long as you see that employment authorization document. Yes, we can. It doesn't really hurt. So somebody, came in for they came in a boat, but then the immigration decided to help them, which is U.S. immigration is very compassionate. It's a lot of people have a negative thinking about U.S. Immigration process or the policies. They're pretty compassionate. They always help people, unlike other countries. So it's a notion that we have. Hey, U.S. Process is very tough. They're very strict. No, they're actually pretty easy. That's how we have, because there are so many categories of visas where they're trying to help immigrants to live in this country. All right, I'll take a pause here. We can open up the floor for questions if you have any questions about visas. Please think about it. This is very important because it gets very confusing when you're in the market. Anyone, any questions?
No, sir.
Is this very confusing? All right, I'm going to stop the recording for now.